We had some underperforming studs in week 1, but that is going to happen when a lot of these guys don't even play in the preseason. Now, starting this week in my ranking shows, I'm going to be going over a few of my biggest hits or misses prior to each position. We always strive to be as accurate as we possibly can, but when we miss on a player, we have no issues acknowledging it. Now, there are going to be timestamps down below because in this video, I'm talking quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. And I'm really going to run through them as quick as I possibly can. And if you're looking for more detailed information, that's over on the Start Sit video. They're already up on the channel. Now, if after this show you find yourself wanting more rankings like flex rankings, kicker rankings, defense rankings, those are member perks. So consider hitting the join button right underneath the video. You're not only going to get those additional rankings, but you're going to get access to Discord and a members only live stream on Sunday mornings. But I understand that there's a few of you out there that are a little bit bummed out about some of the studs you have on your roster after week 1. So to ease the pain a little bit, I'm going to give away a signed Travis Etienne jersey. And you really don't have to do much to get in on the giveaway. Like the video and leave a comment down below with which player on your team right now are you hoping can bounce back in week 2. Then I'll randomly select a comment and I'll announce the winner in next week's show. But all right, let's go ahead and dive into the quarterback rankings first. So let's go ahead and look at a few of my bigger hits and misses from week 1. At the quarterback position, the hits, it was Jaden Daniels. I had him up inside the top 12. A lot of people kind of wanted to wait and see, but with that rushing upside, I had to put him that high. It paid off. How about Dak Prescott? A lot of people got emotional in this video last week down below in the comment section because I had Dak Prescott ranked so low. That turned out to be a correct call. Also, Joe Burrow, I had him outside the top 15. I don't think he's 100% healthy. But then on top of that, not having T. Higgins, maybe not even having 100% Jamar Chase, I was a little bit skeptical, so I dropped him down as well. How about a few of the misses? Baker Mayfield. I was all about the Bake Show, but I wasn't about it that much. He put on a definite show. Derek Carr, I don't think anyone really wanted to start Derek Carr in week 1 of fantasy football, but he had a great week against a lesser opponent in the Carolina Panthers. And then Geno Smith. We were hoping that good Geno would return because 2023 Geno was bad. And honestly, he looked a little bit better in week 1 for sure, so that's something we need to pay attention to going forward. But all right, let's go ahead and bring up the tier rankings now for the quarterback position. And tier 1 is probably going to be the same majority of the season. Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and CJ Stroud. Love the matchup this week for Patrick Mahomes going up against Cincinnati. Jalen Hurts going against Atlanta. I love that, plus the rushing upside. Same with Lamar Jackson in a great matchup going up against Las Vegas, who couldn't stop the rushing attack of the Chargers last week. Josh Allen in a potential shootout against Miami. I like that one as well. And CJ Stroud, the touchdown upside is going to be through the roof weekly. And because of that, because of these rushing upsides for a couple of these guys and their ability to go out there and put up 2 or 3 touchdowns a game, this top 5 is pretty locked in as long as they're all healthy. So because of that, I don't need to sit here and sell you on those guys. Let's move down to tier 2, where I have Anthony Richardson, Jaden Daniels, Tua Tagovailoa, Jared Goff, Kyler Murray, and Brock Purdy. Now for Anthony Richardson, we saw the back foot bomb down the field to Alec Pierce. The only reason he isn't any higher on this list is his passing volume is still a little bit low. Only 19 pass attempts last week. Gave him a good fantasy day, sure. But if we're really looking for that higher ceiling, I mean, come on, we're kind of splitting hairs, right? He's the very first guy in tier 2 on the verge of being tier 1. He may never be the guy that goes out there and throws for 300 yards a week, but with that rushing upside, he's going to be pretty high each and every week. Which then takes us to Jaden Daniels, talking about rushing upside. The passing game kind of struggled last week in week 1, but running the ball the way that he does, 16 times in week 1, that is absolutely huge. Do we all of a sudden think that in week 2, he's not going to run the football at all? No, he's still going to run the ball, and that's why he's still high as well. Then we have Tua Tagovailoa in a matchup going up against Buffalo. The run game in Miami is banged up. We know a Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, they're going to provide a safe floor weekly for Tua. And now a matchup going up against Buffalo, whose secondary is depleted compared to years past. I like myself some Tua in week 2. Then we got Jared Goff in a matchup going up against Tampa Bay. He didn't play bad last week against the Rams, but he barely utilized Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. That is going to change this week against Tampa Bay because their secondary is already banged up as well. Which then takes us to Kyler Murray in a matchup going up against the Los Angeles Rams. Now, Arizona's offense got a little bit soft in the second half last week. They got out to an early lead and then just took their foot off the gas. But let's be honest, they can't continue to ignore Marvin Harrison Jr. At some point, he's going to get more volume and help raise the ceiling of Kyler Murray, who we also saw use his feet in week 1. In a matchup going up against the Rams, potentially playing from behind, getting some garbage time points, I got Kyler Murray at number 10 right here in tier 2. And then we got Brock Doem Dirty Purdy of the San Francisco 49ers in a matchup going up against Minnesota. Ayuk with another week back at practice. And overall, an easier matchup this week for Brock Purdy going against Minnesota. Love the potential upside. All right, now we're going to dive down into tier 3. And this is where we have Baker Mayfield, Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert. We got Matthew Stafford, Trevor Lawrence, and Aaron Rodgers. Now for Baker Mayfield, they're going to struggle running the ball against Detroit. I think almost everyone this year in the NFL is going to. But that's okay, because Tampa Bay has plenty of weapons to throw the ball to, like Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. How about the youngster Jalen McMillan? And we can't count out Rachaad White out of the backfield as well. Love some Baker in a potential matchup where he's going to have to throw the ball all 4 quarters. Then we got Dak Prescott, verge quarterback 1 territory in a matchup going up against New Orleans. But now we know that Jake Ferguson is banged up. I don't dislike this matchup whatsoever for Dak. He's truly a verge top 12 guy this week. There's just a few other guys that I like a little bit more than Dak. But then we go down to Justin Herbert in a matchup going up against the Carolina Panthers, who looked god-awful in week 1. As of right now, we're starting all offensive players against Carolina because they couldn't do anything in week 1. Sometimes you just got to keep it simple. If they're playing the Panthers and the Panthers aren't good, probably want to start the quarterback, at least as a quarterback 2 in this scenario. Then we have Matthew Stafford going up against the Arizona Cardinals. Another one of those matchups where a lot of people don't know what to do because he doesn't have Puka Nacua here this week. But it's a great matchup going up against Arizona. I just see them finding more rushing success and not having to throw the ball as much this week. Which will then bring us to Trevor Lawrence of the Jacksonville Jaguars in a matchup going up against Cleveland. They're going to have to throw more against this Cleveland defense. It's going to be very hard for Travis Etienne to really get going on the ground this week. But with the likes of Christian Kirk and Brian Thomas Jr. and Gabe Davis, he has the weapons to make a couple big plays this week. We saw something similar last week with Dak Prescott. Now, the ceiling may not be overly high like Dak's wasn't either, but as a mid to low end quarterback 2, not a bad option. And then we have Aaron Rodgers in a matchup going up against Tennessee. I would love to say that this is an easier matchup this week for Aaron Rodgers, but Tennessee is no slouch of a defense. Plus, the most concerning part for me here, do you realize that there were only 2 wide receivers in New York last week that got even 1 target? We had Garrett Wilson and Allen Lazard. No other wide receiver on the roster even saw a target. You have to think that at some point that is going to change. Now, it may not change much this week in a difficult matchup, but Aaron Rodgers can still push the ball down the field. But all right, now we're going to move on from quarterbacks. We're moving on to the running back position. We'll start off with the hits and misses. My hits, we got Kenneth Walker, Joe Mixon, and Kyren Williams. Now, obviously, Kenneth Walker and Joe Mixon had huge days, and I had them super high in my rankings last week. But Jake, why is Kyren Williams a hit? He didn't have that big of a game. It's because I had him ranked outside the top 12. A lot of people who drafted him early thought it was absolutely nuts to not have him higher in week 1 of the regular season. This goes back to that Detroit Lions rushing defense that we just talked about a few moments ago. They held him in check. I dropped him in the rankings and it definitely helped out. How about some of my biggest misses? J.K. Dobbins. I'm sorry, but I'm almost okay with missing on JK majority of the year. The guy has had every major injury possible. His knee looks like a transformer. He couldn't make it all the way down the field without running out of gas. There's just a lot of red flags there, but the dude had over 120, 130 yards on 10 carries. Nutso. Then Alexander Madison. I expected more from Zamir White. We did not get it. Alexander Madison looked like the better running back. And then Jonathan Taylor. Talk about a stud who somewhat dudded in week 1. I expected a lot more than what we got from him. But let's go ahead and dive into the tier rankings because I am a glutton for punishment for sure. Let's bring up tier 1. Now, the first 2 guys up here are actually playing each other. Jonathan Taylor, and Josh Jacobs. For JT, Green Bay could not stop Saquon Barkley for anything in week 1. And I think it's pretty apparent that it's easier to run on Green Bay than it is to throw on them. I'm expecting a large week from Jonathan Taylor in week 2. Then as for Josh Jacobs, Indianapolis allowed Joe Mixon to basically do anything he wanted in week 1. Now, more than likely, no Jordan Love, which means they're going to have to rely heavily on the run game. They will not win this game if they're reliant on Malik Willis throwing the ball down the field. Then we have Kyren Williams in a great matchup going up against Arizona. Like I said, week 1 was very tough for him going up against Detroit. Arizona is a much better matchup. What I do love is Kyren Williams played 91% of the offensive snaps. We know there's no Puka Nacua, and the last time that Kyren Williams faced the Arizona Cardinals, he had over 200 total yards and 2 touchdowns. Then we got Joe Mixon. 33 touches in week 1, one of the best overall offenses in the NFL, and now they're going up against a team that just allowed Tony Pollard to have a great game in the Chicago Bears. Then we have Saquon Barkley going up against Atlanta. How fun is it to see Saquon in a good offense with a good offensive line, touchdowns aplenty in 2024, and then Bijan Robinson going up against the Eagles. It's easier to throw on Philadelphia than run, but we did see Josh Jacobs have over 100 total yards against the Eagles just last week, and with the volume we see going the way of Bijan, he can definitely do the same thing as well. Hopefully he can find the end zone, which will then lead us down to tier 2, where we have Breece Hall, Isaiah Pacheco, James Conner, Derrick Henry, Jordan Mason, Jahmyr Gibbs, James Cook, Ramondre Stevenson, and Alvin Kamara. Now for Breece Hall in a matchup going up against Tennessee, and I would love to say this is an easier matchup for him as well, but it really isn't. This has everything to do with the fact that he's going to be right around 20 plus touches a game and over 5 targets a game as well, in an offense that has higher touchdown upside than in years past. Breece Hall is right here at the top of tier 2. Then we have Isaiah Pacheco of the Chiefs going up against the Cincinnati Bengals, and we know things are not going great right now in Cincy. They just allowed Ramondre Stevenson to run wild in week 1, and now Isaiah Pacheco in a 2-dimensional offense is going to have running lanes all over the place. Then we move down to James Conner in a matchup going up against the Rams, and this one, he is the one constant in the Arizona offense. It's James Conner when he's healthy. We just saw Detroit run it down the Rams' throat in week 1. If Arizona wants to have any chance at winning this game, they're gonna have to do the same thing and keep the ball away from the Rams. Then we have Derrick Henry in a matchup going up against Las Vegas. If his floor is 10 points against a tough Kansas City run defense in a negative game script, what can he do against the Las Vegas Raiders, who just gave up 176 yards on the ground to the Chargers? Then we have Jordan Mason, because as of right now, does not sound like we're going to have Christian McCaffrey. He's going up against the Minnesota Vikings. Now, CMC, like I said, is already doubtful to play, and in a great matchup, we could see Jordan Mason kill it again, which then leads us to Jahmyr Gibbs of the Detroit Lions going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and everyone knows that David Montgomery is going to be used a lot, but what did week 1 show us? It showed us that the Lions have a lot of faith in Jahmyr Gibbs on early downs and running between the tackles. There was some concern that, maybe he wasn't 100%. Those concerns are almost all but gone, which will then bring us down to James Cook going up against Miami, and honestly, he's really a fringe player who I had a hard time ranking here in week 2. It's a tough matchup, but his ceiling is just too high to ignore in a game in which he could get a couple extra checkdowns if they're playing from behind. So I put him right here at the end of tier 2, still a top 15 play at the position, but there is some risk involved. Then we have Ramondre Stevenson going up against Seattle, and let's be honest, Ramondre Stevenson is the only part of the New England offense that really matters in fantasy football right now. 28 touches in week 1 makes him a weekly running back 2 at minimum, just due to the volume. Then we have Alvin Kamara going up against the Dallas Cowboys on the road in Dallas. This is a much tougher matchup for him this week. The Cowboys, a little bit better than the Carolina Panthers. Kamara did really benefit from that easy matchup just last week, but 20 touches with work in the passing game has got to keep him right around verge top 15 every single week, and that's where he sits right now. which will then take us down now to Tier 3, where we have Kenneth Walker, Devon Achane, Travis Etienne, Brian Robinson Jr., David Montgomery, Rashad White, Najee Harris, Aaron Jones, J.K. Dobbins, and Tony Pollard for Kenneth Walker in a matchup going up against New England. I mean, I would love to have this guy a little bit higher, but he's already dealing with an abdominal injury. Now, he's come out and said that he is okay. The only reason I have him this high, though, is because there's a lot of other guys in this tier that have a lot of risks as well, like Devon Achane. We don't even know for sure if he's going to play. He's a game-time decision against the Buffalo Bills. We're only through 1 week, and this guy is already banged up and is a game-time decision. This is what we warn people about all season long, and here we go. 1 week into the season, we're already dealing with it, but we already know if he plays, if he's healthy, he's got a ridiculous ceiling. It just depends if he plays, and if he does, how limited is he? Then we got Travis Etienne in a tough matchup going up against the Cleveland Browns. And really, it's not the best of matchups. We just saw Zeke get a little bit of room against this Cleveland defense. There's some risk, but the guy continues to show that he knows how to find the end zone, and that matters in fantasy football. Then we got Brian Robinson Jr. going up against the Giants. Now, B-Rob, this dude looked great in week 1 and had the same amount of targets in the passing game as Austin Eckler. I got to show him a little bit more love in week 2, especially in a good matchup going up against the Giants. I've bumped him up in my rankings. Then David Montgomery going up against Tampa Bay. He won't always be the flashiest guy in this backfield or this overall offense, but he is absolutely loved in Detroit because he has the ability to run through a mother's face on a weekly basis. The guy has scored touchdowns in like 14 of his last 18 games. That is nutso. Then we have Rashad White going up against the Lions. Not a great matchup. The Lions are going to be one of the best run defenses in the NFL this entire season. They just held Kyren Williams in check. It's going to be a rough week probably for Rashad White. He's going to be very reliant on the pass-catching upside here this week. Then we have Najee Harris going up against Denver. Now, apparently, it's pretty obvious that Jaylen Warren is not 100% healthy right now, and because of that, Najee Harris is going to get the volume, especially more so this week because their next highest weapon is George Pickens, who's going to be blanketed by Patrick Surtain. I expect quite a bit of Najee here this week. Hopefully he can find the end zone. Then we have Aaron Jones going up against San Francisco. Now, San Francisco did pretty dang well last week against Breece Hall. In order for these wide running lanes to be open for Aaron Jones, though, Sam Darnold is going to have to bring the magic again and push the ball down the field. Can we be overly reliant and dependent on Sam Darnold and have that warm fuzzy on the inside? Not just yet. Let's see if he can do it multiple weeks in a row first. Then we have J.K. Dobbins. Why is J.K. Dobbins so high? He's playing the Carolina Panthers. Now, I said this during the waiver wire show. Something has to give with J.K. Dobbins, right? He's not going to average over 10 yards a carry this entire season long. And if he's only getting 10 carries a game, that could be a problem if he doesn't bust off the big one. But for right now, he's healthy, and in a matchup going up against Carolina, you can't deny the fact that they are absolutely horrible on defense. Which then leads us the last guy here in Tier 3. It's Tony Pollard in a matchup going up against the Jets. Now, the Jets just got absolutely torched on the ground by the 49ers and Jordan Mason. Now, while I think there's an opportunity for Tony Pollard to find some success here this week, I really hate to have him listed low, but there are so many other running backs with better matchups here that I've kind of moved him down right here to the bottom of Tier 3. Which will then lead us to Tier 4, where I have Ezekiel Elliott, Devin Singletary, Gus Edwards, Jerome Ford, DeAndre Swift, Zach Moss, and Austin Eckler. For Ezekiel Elliott, he's going up against the Saints here this week, and the Saints weren't really tested in week 1. Zeke had a tough matchup himself last week, so we really can't take away a bunch from that. He's still more of a flex option at best. Then we have Devin Singletary going up against the Washington Commandos. Now, Singletary is the clear leader in the Giant backfield, but the touchdown opportunities in this offense are going to be few and far between, so it's really hard to put him any higher. Then we have Gus Edwards in that matchup going up against Carolina. Don't be surprised that even in a split backfield like we see with the Chargers, if Gus Edwards doesn't find the end zone 1, maybe even 2 times in garbage time here this week. Then we have Jerome Ford going up against Jacksonville. He didn't have a bad week 1. Why is he so low? the Jacksonville defense is legit. But not just that, Deshaun Watson looks absolutely horrible and is killing this overall offense, really making it hard to run consistently. And don't forget, this Jacksonville defense really held the Miami running backs in check in week 1. Then we have DeAndre Swift going up against Houston. He averaged 3 yards per carry and only got 1 target in week 1, which was not ideal at all. Now a tough matchup going up against Houston, who just held Jonathan Taylor in check. That's a little bit iffy. Then we have Zach Moss going against Kansas City, an offense that looks absolutely horrible in Cincy, going up against one of the best run defenses in the NFL. If Derrick Henry struggled to run against this defense, Zach Moss probably will as well. And then we have Austin Eckler. Now, Eckler was way more efficient than Brian Robinson. He just didn't see the volume. He's more of a flex play, especially if you play in a league that has 2 flexes. Then he becomes a little bit more of an option. We're really waiting for this passing game to start to click here with Jaden Daniels, which will then lead us down into tier 5 to finish it off. It's Javonte Williams, Alexander Madison, Zach Charbonnet, as well as Zamir White, and then I had to put Jeff Wilson Jr. and Jalen Wright in here as well. We'll talk about them in a second. First up for Javonte Williams going up against Pittsburgh. I just don't understand why so many people expected so much more from Javonte Williams. Now he's in a split backfield with Jaleel McLaughlin, who honestly looks a little bit better. Plus, we have a quarterback that likes to take off and run himself. Now a matchup going up against Pittsburgh is just not ideal. Then we got Alexander Madison, who's going up against Baltimore. He looked like the better running back in Las Vegas in week 1. He earned some touches, but not a great matchup. Then we have Zach Charbonnet here going up against the New England Patriots with Kenneth Walker banged up. We are definitely paying close attention to that injury. If he's limited at all, Zach Charbonnet will probably climb up inside tier 4. If for whatever reason that we lose Kenneth Walker this week, Zach Charbonnet may go up into tier 3. But it's definitely something we need to pay attention to. Then we have Zamir White in that split backfield going up against the Baltimore Ravens. But then we get to the guys in Miami. And that's what everyone wants to know. What are we supposed to do? We know Raheem Mostert has been ruled out. We know that Devon Achane is a game-time decision. Is this the time to unleash the beast that is Jalen Wright? And honestly, I want to say yes. However, Jeff Wilson Jr. may get first crack at touches. But if we reach a situation where we do not have Devon Achane, both Jalen Wright and Jeff Wilson Jr. should have a role in this game in week 2. So really, I'm going to say this. If Devon Achane sits, I'm going Jeff Wilson this week. That does not mean that we give up on Jalen Wright long term. As the season progresses, if any more serious injuries happen where these running backs miss extended periods of time, I'll take Jalen Wright over Jeff Wilson Jr. in the long run 10 out of 10 times. But all right, now we've made it through running backs. We're moving on to the wide receiver position. We're starting off with my hits and misses first. At the hits, I got Mike Evans. I ranked him inside the top 5 last week, and people thought I was nutso. Then Mike Evans went the hell off. Cooper Kupp, I had him up inside my top 12. Dude had like 20 targets and went off. Yes, that had something to do with Puka getting injured, but still, he was already super high. And then Rashid Shaheed. I had people comment on last week's video saying, why is this dude even ranked? You saw last week as to why. Now, some of my bigger misses, Jaden Reed. I don't think anyone out there was expecting him to finish as the overall wide receiver 1. Dude was all over the field. But without Jordan Love, that's going to be a little bit iffy. Terry McLaurin, talk about a swing and a miss. Jaden Daniels just tucked the ball and ran more than looking down the field on those deep options. And then Marvin Harrison Jr. I think everyone wanted more for Marvin Harrison. And the guy was running wide open. He had like a 50-yard touchdown where he was like standing by himself, just waving his hands, and Kyler Murray didn't throw him the football. You have to think that changes going forward. But all right, now let's move into the rankings here. In tier 1, I got Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, Cooper Kupp, Mike Evans, and A.J. Brown. Now we'll start off with Tyreek Hill, and honestly, I'm contemplating just writing his name here in permanent marker on the top of the rankings every single week that he's healthy. CeeDee Lamb in a matchup going up against New Orleans. With Jake Ferguson out, that means more CeeDee Lamb. Then we have Cooper Kupp, same type of thing. A great matchup going up against Arizona, and Puka has been placed on IR. Cooper Kupp's going to see 15 plus targets a game. Then we have Mike Evans. It's way easier to throw on Detroit than it is to run on them, so you better believe Mike Evans is going to get some looks in week 2. Then we have A.J. Brown going up against Atlanta. Now, he may see less volume this week due to the matchup, but the big plays and the ceiling is too hard to pass up. One big play touchdown can give you a game-winning performance. So, all right, let's keep it moving. Let's go down to tier 2, where we have Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson, Deebo Samuel, Garrett Wilson, Rashee Rice, Marvin Harrison Jr., Nico Collins, and Jalen Waddle. Now, for Amon-Ra St. Brown in a matchup going up against Tampa Bay, I understand that week 1 was an absolute disaster, but do you just think the Lions are going to abandon him? No, he's still an above average option and now gets an above average matchup going up against Tampa Bay, whose secondary is already hurting. Then we have Justin Jefferson going up against the San Francisco 49ers. He was saved by a touchdown in week 1 against the New York Giants. But we just saw San Francisco give up 200 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns through the air in week 1. Justin Jefferson just needs the volume and good Sam Darnold to show up. Then we have Deebo Samuel going up against Minnesota. With Christian McCaffrey most likely out, that means more rushing attempts are going the way of Deebo Samuel. Not a ton. Jordan Mason's still going to handle the load, but it's definitely going to keep Deebo higher in the rankings. And then we have Garrett Wilson going up against Tennessee. He was one of only 2 wide receivers that were targeted in this offense in week 1. It will not be an easy matchup for him this week, though, going up against L'Jarius Sneed. Then we have Rashee Rice, a 2024 version of Slant Boy. But in that offense, with Patrick Mahomes under center, I'll take it each and every week in a good matchup going up against Cincinnati. Then I have Marvin Harrison Jr. right here going up against the Rams. He was open multiple times, and Kyler Murray just stayed on those underneath routes and missed him deep down the field. You have to expect a bounce back. Sure, you're seeing some of the sound bites this week from Kyler Murray, and it's not my job to get him targets. They want to get him the ball more. Trust me. You do not draft a wide receiver at 4 overall and just abandon him. But until we see that usage creep up a little bit, he's dropped a few spots in the rankings. Then we have Nico Collins. We said last week in this show that Nico was the safest option of all Houston wide receivers, but he only had 1 target more than Tank Dell and only 2 targets more than Stephon Diggs. I really expect that to continue each and every week. The difference is going to come with Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell. Who's going to be finding the end zone more consistently? And then we have Jalen Waddle going up against Buffalo. With the run game banged up in Miami and Jalen Waddle looking absolutely great in week 1, a matchup going up against Buffalo is definitely one that he can succeed in. So let's move down to tier 3 then, where I have Jamar Chase, DJ Moore, Malik Neighbors, Drake London, DK Metcalf, Devontae Adams, Chris Godwin, and Zay Flowers. Now for Jamar Chase going up against Kansas City, I would love to have him higher in the rankings for sure, but I'm still not convinced that Joe Burrow is 100% healthy, and we know that Jamar Chase himself is not 100% happy, so this is where he's sitting the top of tier 3. Then we have DJ Moore going up against Houston. With Roma Dunze and Keenan Allen already banged up, this is the chance for DJ Moore to put together a couple of good games. We saw that Houston was vulnerable deep down the field last week against the Indianapolis Colts. Can they do it in Chicago this week? Then we got Malik Neighbors going up against Washington. A Washington secondary that was just torched by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last week. And Malik Neighbors is going to see multiple deep shots down the field in this game, so I've bumped him up a couple spots in week 2. Then we have Drake London going up against Philadelphia. And if Atlanta wants to have any chance at all at winning this game, they're going to have to throw the ball more in week 2, and it's going to have to be to someone other than Ray McLeod. Drake London has to start seeing a higher target share. Then we have DK Metcalf going against New England. A lower ceiling due to the matchup. That and Tyler Lockett was a little bit more involved in week 1 than a lot of people had expected. Then Devontae Adams going up against Baltimore. And honestly, it's probably going to be pretty hard for him to get many deep balls in this game. However, he should see enough volume to give him that safer floor. Then we have Chris Godwin going up against Detroit. I told you we were going to love Chris Godwin in the slot. He led the team in targets, and he's getting red zone looks. Tampa Bay is going to be throwing the ball all week long against the Detroit Lions. And then Zay Flowers going up against the Raiders, double-digit targets in week 1, and really no reason for it to not happen again is why he's in tier 3 as well. Which will then take us down to tier 4. We have Chris Olave, Brandon Ayuk, Tank Dell, Jamison Williams, Terry McLaurin, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Smith, and Xavier Worthy. Now for Chris Olave, not an easy matchup, especially since we're seeing Rashid Shaheed get some of those deep looks down the field. It means we're going to have to lessen our expectations a little bit on Chris Olave, still a wide receiver too. Then we have Brandon Ayuk going up against Minnesota. A better matchup for him here this week, but he's being worked in a little bit slowly. He needs more practice for sure after the holdout. Then we have Tank Dell going up against Chicago. Diggs is the one who was able to find the end zone in week 1, but Tank still saw more targets. I'm looking for Tank to have a look or maybe even 2 at the end zone this week. Then we have Jamison Williams going up against Tampa Bay. He looks so good and so involved in week 1. Now he gets the banged up Tampa Bay secondary. Absolutely love it for the wide receivers in Detroit. Then Terry McLaurin going up against the Giants. He absolutely disappeared in week 1. Daniels really just tucked the ball and ran instead of throwing it deeper down the field. This is an easier matchup though, so hopefully the targets can return in week 2. Then we have Stephon Diggs going up against Chicago. Not everyone can score a touchdown every single week in Houston, but they are going to score a lot of touchdowns in Houston. So with that being said, there's always going to be a chance at Stephon Diggs finding the end zone. A little bit boomer bust, just like Tank Dell. Then we have Devontae Smith, second on the team in targets. Brought in 7 of his 8 targets alone in week 1, but there's just nothing consistent deeper down the field, and that's probably going to be the story more times than not in 2024. Then we have Xavier Worthy. We can't rely on a rushing touchdown and a broken defensive play for a touchdown each and every week, but this team knows how to use speed, so more than likely, he's going to be a weekly boomer bust flex play for whoever wants to take that risk. Which will then bring us to our final tier, tier 5. It's Michael Pittman, George Pickens, Christian Kirk, Khalil Shakir, Rashid Shaheed, Amari Cooper, and Calvin Ridley. Now for Michael Pittman going up against Green Bay, he's going to draw Jair Alexander, and this Indianapolis offense only threw the ball 19 times in week 1, so not ideal. Then we have George Pickens going against Denver. He's going to draw Patrick Surtain, and is really reliant on that 50-50 deep ball down the field. Then Christian Kirk going up against Cleveland. This is a tough matchup, but he tied for the team lead in targets, so I'm not writing him off here just yet. Then Khalil Shakir in Buffalo in a matchup going up against Miami. He found the end zone in week 1 and will now have a matchup where they're going to have to throw the ball all 4 quarters to keep pace with the Miami Dolphins. Then Rashid Shaheed going up against Dallas. He led all wide receivers in New Orleans in targets and averaged 24.3 yards per reception, exactly what we talked about all offseason long. Then Amari Cooper going against Jacksonville. This is more of a Deshaun Watson problem than an Amari Cooper problem. Deshaun Watson looks bad. And then Calvin Ridley going up against the Jets. He's going to have a tough matchup against Sauce Gardner, and they're starting to expect DeAndre Hopkins to get more and more work as the season progresses. Now, I will say this when it comes to the wide receiver position. There are about 45 or so wide receivers each and every week that deserve to be inside the top 30 or 35. It's the deepest position in fantasy football. So just because you may not see a name in these rankings does not mean they absolutely suck. If you want to know where they're ranked, just leave me a comment down below and I can let you know how far down the list I have them. But now that we're done wide receivers, let's move on to the tight end position, which was an absolute cluster, if you know what I'm talking about, in week 1. I can't really do many hits or misses because everyone was a miss for the most part. The only tight end that didn't really suck in week 1 was Isaiah Likely. It was by far one of the worst weeks for fantasy tight ends in my 20 plus years of doing this. But all right, let's go ahead and dive into the rankings. At the top here in tier 1, I got Trey McBride, George Kittle, Sam Laporta, and Travis Kelce. Now for Trey McBride, he's going up against the Rams, and we saw last week that Trey McBride is really the top check down option for Kyler Murray, and I really don't expect that to change this week. I think the Rams can find the end zone a couple times, forcing Arizona to have to throw the ball. Trey McBride could rack up some targets. Then George Kittle going up against Minnesota. More than likely no CMC like we've talked about, which typically always means more Debo and more Kittle. I expect them to look towards George Kittle once they get inside the red zone this week. Then Sam Laporta going up against Tampa Bay. With Jameson Williams being a thing here in 2024, it's going to take away some of the scoring opportunities for Sam Laporta, but in such a good matchup, I still got to put him this high. And then we have Travis Kelce going up against Cincinnati. He's just not needed as much in Kansas City's offense like he has been in the past. He's a little bit more of a luxury in this offense, especially with Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy out there. But then that's going to take us to tier number 2, where we have Kyle Pitts, Dalton Kincaid, Isaiah Likely, Brock Bowers, and Evan Ingram. For Kyle Pitts, he's going up against the Philadelphia Eagles, who are still easier to throw on than run on, and if Atlanta wants to have any chance in this game, they're going to have to throw the ball more towards Drake London and Kyle Pitts to even have a chance. Then Dalton Kincaid going against Miami. What the hell happened to Dalton Kincaid in week 1? He was completely taken out of the game, and Buffalo didn't even try to get him the football. That is not going to happen all season long. Then we go down to Isaiah Likely going up against Las Vegas. Now, no, Mark Andrews is not completely done, but Isaiah Likely sure looks like the tight end that's going to see the most consistent volume in this offense in the foreseeable future. Then Brock Bowers going up against Baltimore. He led the team in targets in week 1. This is not an easy matchup, but just due to the volume alone, has an opportunity to be a low-end tight end one this week. And then to finish off tier 2, it's Evan Ingram going up against Cleveland. Not a great matchup for him as well, especially since Brian Thomas Jr. is already stepping up and going off right off the bat. We could see lower volume going the way of Evan Ingram. That's why he's dropped down a couple spots. Which then only leads us the 3rd tier here for Mark Andrews, Colby Parkinson, Dallas Goedert. We got Pat Freiermuth, Mike Gesicki, and Taysom Hill. Now for Mark Andrews going up against Las Vegas, this matchup is still really good, and Baltimore has limited pass catching weapons. He can't just be completely done. Then Colby Parkinson going up against Arizona. He had a decent role in week 1. Now we know we don't have Puka Nacua, which means more targets could be going his way, but you got to be a little bit careful. I don't have him any higher because Arizona showed last week they could take away Dalton Kincaid. And then we have Dallas Goedert going up against Atlanta. It's really just hard for him to find consistent volume with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and now Saquon Barkley touching the ball a ton. How about Pat Freiermuth going up against Denver? And he did exactly what we expected in week 1. We talked about it all off season long. He may not get huge yardage, but he's going to be among the team leaders in targets. He was 2nd in targets in Pittsburgh just last week. What about Mike Gesicki going up against Kansas City? He just missed having a huge day by not controlling the ball all the way to the ground in the end zone. Could have had a big time touchdown. We know T. Higgins is still hurt. Jamar Chase is still pissed, and someone has to catch balls in this game going up against Kansas City, who was just torched by who last week? Yes, Isaiah Likely. And then we have Taysom Hill to round out tier 3 in a matchup going up against Dallas. This one right here is all about the rushing potential weekly. Plus, he just barely missed out on a huge touchdown himself on a wheel route down the sideline. He is involved all over the field, and he'll probably remain inside my top 15 most of the season. All right, so there you have your week 2 rankings for fantasy football. Don't forget to hit the like button and leave a comment down below because I'm going to be picking a winner for this Travis Etienne jersey in this show next week. Now, like I always say in ranking shows, I don't expect your rankings to match my rankings, and that is okay. If all of our rankings always matched, they would be pointless to even watch. It's when we come together as a community and build rankings together, it's the reason we've found so much success in a short amount of time. So I look forward to talking to you down below in the comment section, but I'm going to go ahead and get out of here for the day. Hopefully you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and most importantly, do your part to make the world a better place. Analytics.